everyone, this is EllyMae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and in today's video I'm going to share with you how you can create this interactive card in the Silhouette Studio software. A group member posted a card creation that she had made from an idea she had seen somewhere, and through a little bit of research we think we found the original designer by Dress My Crafts, and I am sharing today how you can recreate that card style in the Silhouette Studio software. So I did purchase the spinners from Dress My Crafts. Here's a look at the ones I've purchased. They have several different sizes, and I will provide more resources and links in the video description below, so make sure to check that out as well. But I'm going to share with you how you can create a card style like this in the Silhouette Studio software. So over in the Silhouette Studio software, you can either start by drawing your own card base, or we're going to come up here to File and New Project Wizard. I'm going to create a 5x7 card. Under the New Project Wizard, there is a card template. So I'm simply going to select that. It's going to start it on a new design mat. And then it changes the machine, which changes my page. I'm simply just going to change that back to a Cameo 5. Now I have this 5x7 card layout, but I don't like the score line in this, so I always change it. So I'm going to right click on this file. I'm going to choose Ungroup, click off of it to deselect it, and then back on this line only. And I'm going to come over to the line style panel on the right hand side, and then I'm going to change the style of it to a bolder dash line. And then I also bring this in just a little bit on both ends because I don't like that line to cut through the edge of my card either. And then left click and drag across both of those. I can use this center option. It's going to center that score line on my card base again. And then I can right click and choose group. Now I have my card base. The next thing I want to do is I want to change the orientation of this. I'm going to open the transform panel on the right hand side, which is those three rectangles with the line through it. I'm going to select the rotate option at the top and rotate this 90 degrees, simply because this is the layout that I want to create my card at. Now I have my card base designed. I'm just going to move it off to the left, and I'm going to fill that with a color so we can see that. And then when I filled it with a gray, it'll be whatever color you cut your card base out of, but so we can see it on our design mat when we work with it. And then next I want to create my background layer, which is going to either be a pattern paper that you cut, or you could also use a printable pattern and then print the design and cut the shape out of that. So I'm going to come over on the left hand side to the draw rectangle tool, select that, and I'm simply going to just draw any size rectangle. It does not have to be perfect because I can change that. So either in the quick access toolbar at the top you have your width and your height, or in the transform panel, which is already open, it's that three rectangles with the line on the through the middle. The second tab is your scale tab, and you'll also see those width and the height options there. Now, when you are doing this, you want your lock aspect to be unlocked because I need to change both the height and the width, and I don't want them to change proportionally. So with it unlocked, I have the ability to manually set both of those. So for my width, I want to set this to 6.75 and hit enter. And then for my height, I'm going to choose 4.75. And then I can just fill this with the color so we can see it and move it over here onto my card base. So what you can see here, I'm going to left click and drag across both of those and just center it across align the center. Now I'm going to have an edge around this card here when I cut all the pieces out and put it together. Since I've already drawn a rectangle, I am going to just make a copy. So I'm going to hold my Alt key down, make a copy, and then I can adjust this layer a little bit smaller, so then I have a border around my next two card layers. So this is going to give us a neat creation to this card that Teresa, my admin, had designed that I really liked, and I'm sharing that with you on how you can create that layered look too. So with this layer, we want to make it just a little bit smaller. So and it's just going to vary depending on how much of a border of your pattern paper that you want showing around the edges here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the color here so it's a little bit different. So once we layer this, we'll be able to see it. And then I'm going to change this to 6.25 and 4.25. And then what you'll see here is that gives us a border around that design. Again, it's completely personal preference on how you want this, but if you want more of your pattern showing around the edges, then you want to make it a little bit smaller. So we have our first layer here. Next, I'm going to save my file so that if something happens on my computer, I haven't lost all my work. So I'm going to come up to File, Save. This also works if you want to create and save templates so that you could not have to start over and do the same process every single time. So I'm going to just name this to save it. And then we can start working with our sentiment. So I'm going to use the word joy. I'm going to come over on the left-hand side and choose the text style, the letter A, and I'm going to click on my design mat to get that text cursor. I'm going to use all capital letters and type out the word joy, and then click off of it once to deselect it and click back on it one time. This is going to allow me to change the properties, such as fill color. So that I'm going to fill it with a black just so that we can see this. And this is the default text of Arial. Next, I'm going to change this and I'm going to use just a general font, but you want to use bold fonts for the best results. So you're able to have some space cut out and be able to see your background pattern. If you can definitely try with scripty fonts and see how that turns out for you. But just keep it in mind when you are working with this, you're going to see more of that background come through this layered card if you have a bolder font. So with the text selected, I'm going to click on the letter A on the right hand side, which is your text style panel, and then give it some time to open. It does load those fonts when you first select that after you open Silhouette Studio. The first time you select the text style panel is when those fonts load. So depending on how many fonts you have on your computer, it may take it a little bit. Since I know what font I'm going to use, I'm going to highlight the name at the top and I'm just going to choose Impact. I know Impact is a big, bold font, so I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to make a copy of this. I like to have copies of things that I just, especially when I'm working with text, because once we change this in any way from edit, it's going to make it no longer editable text. So if I click back on this original here, what you're going to see is you see excess space around the top and the bottom. This is in case you change the font, it leaves room for any of the other letters in this font style. So for instance, you have your lowercase g, your lowercase y. If you have any scripts that go at the top or any extra glyphs, that type of thing. So you always have this excess space. This is why it's not accurate text sizing. I will also include a link to how you can get accurate text sizing in 5 different ways in the video description below for additional resources too. So with this, what I want to do, I've made a copy, so I have the original. I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose Convert to Path. That is going to take it from an editable text. Now it is a vector design. You can see over here with that design selected, I no longer have my text options. It is now grayed out because the software sees it as a design, not editable text. So what I want to do here is I'm going to bring this up in here, and I can just kind of enlarge that using the corner bounding box. That's going to enlarge it proportionally. If you use the side, either any of these middles and sides, you can stretch it. Sometimes it looks okay with fonts and sometimes it doesn't. This actually doesn't look too bad. And then there is no magic size. Whatever text style you choose, that may determine the size that you want or what looks good for your design. So I am going to bring this in here and we'll work with this. I'm just going to scale it down just a little bit. Left click, drag across everything, and then center that and see how it looks. So I think that's going to work well for our design. I'm going to use the little disk option up here and click Save. It's going to save my file. And then once it's done saving, now I have the beginnings of my next few layers. So I have this joy. I am going to left click, hold my Alt key down, just drag a copy away just so I have an original. And then I can come back here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a snowflake design. I will put a link in the video description for a tutorial on how I drew these snowflakes, but these are ones that I designed myself. So I'm going to come over here to this snowflake file, and I'm going to select this snowflake, Control C, and then click on my design file and Control V. Now I have this, and the first thing I'm going to do is make a copy. Hold my Alt key down, drag a copy away. So I have an original copy. I'm going to click on this joy, and then I'm going to right click on it and choose ungroup. That is going to separate each of these individual pieces out into individual parts of the design. And I can simply move this one away, and I can place that snowflake in there. Now, we need to adjust some of the spacing here. You can also adjust and see how you want your snowflake to fit in between the two letters. But I can also come in here, select the Y, use my arrow keys, and just kind of bump that out a little bit. And then do the same thing with the J, select it, use my arrow keys, and bump that out just a little bit until you think you like how it looks. Now in this case, I'm going to click on the J, hold my shift key down, click on the snowflake, and then click on the Y. You can come up here to your quick access toolbar under your align tools. I'm going to center this, center the middle, and then we can also choose this space horizontal and see how that looks. But in some cases like this, let's zoom in here so we can see it a little bit better. Because you have the slant of your Y, according to the software, this is spaced horizontally by the center points. But it visually looks a little bit off because you have this Y shape. So I'm just going to click on my snowflake. I'm going to use my arrow keys, and I can bump this over until I think it looks okay. Complete personal preference there. And then once I have how I like it, I can hold my shift key down, my snowflake selected, click on the J, click on the Y, and then right click and choose group or use Control G. Now, personally, I feel this is a little bit big for the card style. It would actually work. So I might leave it. I am going to left click, drag across it. You could make it a little bit smaller if you wanted to, but let's go with it. Let's go with the bold. I'm going to choose center and center that into the center of that card base. Now, since I made changes, I'm going to left click and drag across everything, hold my Alt key down and move that copy away, and then save my file. Once you get into designing in this way, it will get faster and faster, or sometimes you may decide that you don't like it at all. You scrap the whole thing and start from your template file again and redesign it. Or you can simply go back to one of your copies and start creating from there. So it really just depends on your workflow and how you design, but it's not going to take you a long time every single time, unless that's how you work. Sometimes it takes me all day long to design things, and then I go back to the original design I started with. Now we're going to add another aspect to this. So what I want to do is I'm going to left click and drag across both of these, and then I'm going to drag a copy away. So hold my Alt key down, drag a copy away. And this first one is going to be our top layer. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take this, and currently you can see with I left click and dragged across everything to select it. So I have two layers. I have Joy is on top of my blue layer. I am going to take this and I'm going to make it one layer. So I'm going to, with both of these selected, I'm going to right click and choose Make Compound Path. That is going to take those two layers, combine them into one layer, and essentially we have just cut the Joy out of that layer. Next, what I'm going to do is add a visual aspect to it, which is a layered layer. You'll see what I mean in here in just a second, but this was such a neat idea that I saw in the creation by Teresa that I thought I would share it with you. So in this one, we want to offset this just a little bit to create that layered look. So what I'm going to do is you can decide if you want to do an external offset or an internal offset. It will all depend on what your shape looks like in the middle on what will look better. If I do an external offset, that is going to, this is such a small space in between my snowflake areas that it would just melt together. So I don't know that it would look great. So I'm going to, with Joy selected, I'm going to come over to my offset panel. I'm going to use an internal offset. And then you can adjust that as needed. And I can choose apply. Now, once I hit apply, since none of those were overlapping each other, they are all now individual objects. I'm going to use Control G, or you can use Command G on a Mac. That's going to group them together. That is the keyboard shortcut. And then I'm just going to fill this with colors so you can see it. And that's almost too much of a similar color. So there is the Joy internal offset. What we can do is zoom out here, and I can move the original away off to the side. And now I have this. I'm going to left click and drag across everything to select it. And then I'm going to, again, combine the layers. I'm going to right click on it and choose Make Compound Path. It's going to cut that out of it. And I'm going to change this to a darker color. And then what we can do is we can put these layers back together. Since I designed this one, it's going to be on top, but what I want it to do is I want it to be underneath. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can right click on the Joy and choose Bring to Front, the blue Joy, and Bring to Front. So that is your top layer. That's usually what I do. It's the fastest. So now I can left click and drag across both of these and use the center icon. And now you can see I have this layered aspect to it. How big of an offset is going to be complete personal preference, and it can change the look of it and give it a little bit different look. So you can see that there. In the original, which is probably what I'm going to cut out as well, it was just 2 layers of white cardstock, but you get a little bit of dimension there. So I'm going to, now I can move this over top, and you can see that my pattern is now going to show through. I'm just going to align the middles here and then zoom in on this. You can see that the pattern is going to show through on those layers. So you have that background pattern showing through, and then you also have this additional layered section on your card. Just creates a little bit more of a unique look to it. And then we can bring this, not this one, bring this one over or make a copy. And I'm going to change the color of this just so we can distinguish between them. And then we can position this, since I rotated it afterwards. And this is going to be the interactive part of our card. So this green layer that I have here is going to be a piece that's cut out individually, and it's going to be added on top of this card in that same area. So you have your visual aspect of this spinner part on top of your pattern paper cutout. And you have created your own card creation using a basic shape, basic shapes in the Silhouette Studio software, drawing some rectangles, and using the basic tools in Silhouette Studio. The next step is just cutting out your layers. So I'm going to cut this out of, I haven't decided yet, maybe some glitter paper. You have these 2 layers, and I believe I'm just going to cut those out of white. They're only showing as color on my screen because of, so you'll be able to get an idea of what it looks like. This layer here, like I said in the beginning, you could cut it out of a pattern paper just fine. Cut a rectangle out of the pattern paper and use that as your background. But you could also do backgrounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this, and I'm going to add this into the video too. And then I'm just going to Control V and paste it onto here. So what I could do is, this is my background layer. I'm not going to set this one up as print and cut. I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick here. I am going to change this to letter size, so I know how much I'm working with, and I'm going to turn on my show print border at the bottom. And then I'm just going to place that there. Now, if I am print and cutting, or if I am printing this basic shape, I could just print a full sheet of the pattern paper, or I can kind of cheat. I'm not going to use registration marks because I'm going to show you a trick on how to do that. Basically, I'm going to create an offset, which is going to act as a print bleed. And then if I'm using a Silhouette mat and I load the mat in the machine properly, it's going to cut in this area that it should cut. Since it's a basic shape, I'm not needing the accuracy around a complex design, so this works great. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make an offset of this. You could simply change the size of it too, but I'm going to just make an offset, open the offset panel on the right hand side, make an offset, and then just adjust that a little bit. So now this is the shape that's going to be cut out of my page. This is the layer that I'm going to print. So in this case, I want to turn this to be a transparent color because I don't want it to print blue. And then I'm going to use the outer offset, and I'm going to come over to my library. I'm going to type in a Snowflake pattern, Snowflake. And I'm going to select this pattern. With that rectangle selected on the design tab, I'm just going to click on that. It's going to fill that. So now what I have is I have this outer print bleed, and my rectangle is going to cut out of the middle of it. I'm going to left click, drag across both of these, and then I can just move this down to the bottom. I just need to be within my print borders. And I can go ahead and I can send this to print. I'm going to be using Epson presentation paper in matte finish. I really like the quality that my printer uses with this paper, and we will move on to the cutting process. Here's a look at my printed page with those rectangles, and then in the Silhouette software, I just changed the outer rectangle to no cut, so it's going to cut inside of my pattern. Here's a look after it was cut, showing you how I created that print bleed so that I did not have to use the registration marks. This works for simple shapes and large things like this. And then I went back into the Silhouette Studio software, arrange everything to cut out the rest of the pieces, and I ended up making 2 cards with this, one with just 2 of the white fronts stacked together, and then one with white and a color layer behind that. So then I just started going into the software and sending it to cut each of those pieces for the cards. And then here's a look at the Silhouette machine just cutting out the card base. So cut all your pieces and then you're ready for assembly. Once I had everything ready, I'm going to take an adhesive tape runner and I'm going to adhere that background to the card base. And then next, this is where I screwed up. This is the best part about having a cutting machine. Since I was on video, I was trying to go a little fast and I can't get into the camera view. So I messed up when putting these 2 layers together. They were not lined up perfectly. And so I had to cut again. That's the best part about having a cutting machine, is you can do that. It's okay to mess up, and I left it in the video. So I went back, I cut the top layers again, and then I came at it from a different angle. So I just glued one side of it together so that I could line it up easier, and then I put adhesive on the rest of the card, and then I could just lay that down so my layers were lined up perfectly, and I have that layered aspect. I'll show a photo of that here at the end. And then what I did was I took on this one and I added foam tape. When you add dimension to it, just keep in mind that then you also need to have dimension onto your spinner as well. So here, the Dress My Craft larger spinner is going to be better for it. And I ended up you test that with your card designs. That's what I ended up doing with this as I was going along in the assembly process. So now I'm just removing the backing. You do not need to cover the whole thing in the double-sided foam tape. Just make sure that it's fully supported in all of the areas. You don't want anything to fold in on itself like the edges of those snowflakes. So I'm just putting small pieces of that foam tape on the inner bits of the snowflake area. And then center that onto your card design. And the next step, you're ready to start putting in your spinners. And then I was just going to grab glue dots. I ended up snipping the edges of my snowflake so that the spinner sat more flat into the design, and that's just going to be design dependent, and one of those things that you learn after the fact, after you've already cut this design and you're testing it. So every design could be a little bit different, but I did cut the snowflakes out of glitter paper, and you can see here I showed a photo of snipping the edges. My edges are not snipped there. It's something I went back in and kind of did afterwards just to get that snowflake, the action, to work a little bit better. And you do that as you put things together. You'll develop ways and think of things. I also tested the smaller ones. When you have the foam tape with that dimension, your smaller spinners aren't going to necessarily work, but I still tested it here. It just wasn't high enough for that snowflake to spin around. But I wanted to leave that in the video so you could see that I did test it. With the next card design, I just layered everything flat and used the smaller spinners. So it really is just whatever you'd like to do. On the left hand side, you're going to see that the second layer on that offset is a color. So you can decide which one that you would like to show. And here's a close-up of the larger spinner in action. And then you can look close and see those layers of that offset, which is 2 layers of cardstock on top of each other. Gives it a unique look, and you can just play around with it and see what works for you. These were fun to make, a very interesting and interactive card. Make sure to check out the links in the video description for additional information. Thanks for watching and have a great day.